Tony, you're the head of an organization called Q Media Labs. What do you do there?
Q stands for questions. We ask questions, and so we have a mix of consulting projects and strategy projects. So the big thaw came out of that. Then we have some practitioner lab projects where we put into action experimental projects to get people to do user-generated content. We have a project called Why Do You Do What You Do, which asks people all over the world, why do you do what you do? It's a little bit more of an art project, but the big thaw was a big project we just finished.
Now that's a sort of a lengthy report. I looked at some of it, explaining where we are with journalism today and where we might be in the future. Does the name The Big Thaw signify anything? I thought it must.
Yeah, The Big Thaw, the subtitle is Charting a New Course for Journalism. And the Big Thaw, the metaphor is, actually there's a guy named Clay Shirky who talked about how nobody's all up in arms about the decline of print journalism. It's actually been like watching a glacier 10 miles off and deciding not to move. And so he says this change has been coming for a decade. So anybody that hasn't moved, hasn't changed, it's just sort of like refusing to move when a glacier's coming. But the thing is that when disruptive technology happens, when industries change, it actually takes a decade before people recognize what are the aspects about it that we can adapt our strategy to. So the big thaw, the metaphor is about like the old paradigm of journalism thawing out. Instead of the floodwaters flooding us when it thaws, we can actually use those currents to go to higher ground if we learn how to use the tools in the right way. So I'm fairly optimistic about it. And the report, it's like a 100-page report, but it really pulls together all the different sort of leading thinkers out there and puts it in a framework that's about adapting your strategy and getting the right competencies and figuring out the right business models for it.
Well, just with the technology, the fact that information can be transmitted so quickly in such large quantities from anywhere to anywhere, I mean, that's a major game changer in itself. Does this mean that media is going to be a lot more decentralized, or is it still going to be dominated by a handful of big media players?
I think it'll be a little bit of both. I mean, building off the video that we saw earlier, the whole Iranian conflict, I think, is a great sort of signal of how media is going to go in the future. And that is that there were people firsthand on the ground that were reporting and getting pictures of conflict, circumventing the government, circumventing mainstream media, but yet it was hard for users to separate the noise from what's relevant and reliable. And I think we'll in the future, we'll constantly have that struggle between separating things that are first-hand accounts that are authentic and things that feel like noise. But I think there are curators. Journalists, I think, will become less educators and more facilitators. There'll be these curators of the best stuff that's coming from Twitter. And then there'll be ones that almost like a Socratic teacher, they'll ask the right questions and they'll build communities, not just impart knowledge. They'll be able to lift out knowledge from a community.
I think this is, the key, that it used to be that media and journalism were synonyms. They are not synonyms anymore. It used to be that the guys who provided the stories were the guys who provided the medium, and you bundled that. So the product was the story and the distribution mechanism for the story. And what's happening now is that you're getting a new category of media companies that provide the medium. And this is everything from telecom operators to Facebook, Twitter. And then the journalists, the storytellers, they become independent players in this. Now, so they move away from being the gatekeepers, and everybody can find information everywhere. But I also subscribe to that we will have some big players, because I think that attention is gravitational. Attention attracts attention. So if 50% of the world's population will watch some show, the other 50% will watch too, just to see what the first 50% are watching. Now, I think the audience will be a bit more mobile than it has been, but we will definitely have that. But then we will also have this tail.
Well, I actually think the attention will still, even though there'll be some big winners and big companies, the attention will ultimately be still very much more distributed. So, like if you looked at television networks in the 1970s compared to the top-rated television show today, and you took the total number of viewers, it'll have less than the total number of viewers from the 15 top television shows in the 70s. That's because people have so much they're paying attention to on so many devices. In fact, I agree with you. I think like users want, any information, anytime, on any platform, on any device. Like they want that freedom. So they won't just go to one source anymore. They won't just go to the New York Times. If you sent me something from a magazine I'd never heard of before, and you said, hey, this is really interesting because of this, and I knew it came from you, I would totally read it, and I would trust it because of that.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. But I think also that we should also realize that we're coming to the time which is probably the first time since the creation of the universe that we are able to point the attention of all human beings on the same story at the same time globally. We have not been able to do that before. And as we sort of approach real-time reporting, that's going to happen. So that's of course going to lead to some very interesting effects in society, because if we think that we until now have had problems with bubbles and hype and stuff, I mean, wait until everybody on Earth is going to put their attention at the same time, and if it now is some terror attack somewhere, or if it is some game show somewhere.
Or Tiger Woods.
Right now,
yes, Tiger Woods.
There's actually a huge amount of data out there, and there's a lot of grassroots media organizations. In fact, we have a video from an organization called theuptake.org showing how a small group of people, all of them volunteers with no real resources, were able to have an effect in the 2008 election campaign. Let's go ahead and roll that tape.
Hard to tell what that was, but it blew up. I don't know if you could see it from there. Wow.
You may have caught the Uptake's live coverage at the Republican National Convention. We seemed to have cameras wherever the action was, and were reporting what was happening hours, if not days, before the legacy media.
And the gassing has started. And we have running.
So how did the Uptake, a nonprofit that operates on a shoestring budget based on the kindness of donors, manage to outdo the multi-million-dollar corporations? Simple. Train, organize, and crowdsource.
I can totally help you with this.
We discovered people learn the most when we do hands-on, one-on-one sessions to cover the basics.
I plug in the microphone, I turn on the camera, I point, I shoot, and suddenly I'm telling my own story.
Okay, now you've got a bunch of people who know how to run a camera and are ready to go out and cover news. So what do you do next? Well, you got to organize. And we do that the same way that we organize a political campaign. We turn to free services available on the web to keep track of volunteers, story ideas, events, and of course equipment. We didn't have our own equipment to start with, so we created a database of tripods, cameras, microphones, and so on that our volunteers owned and were willing to lend out. We also let people submit story ideas to our website. Organizing volunteers was integral to our marathon coverage of Minnesota's U.S. Senate recount and election contest trial.
The ballots are missing.
The Uptake was the only media to cover every minute of this, and thousands around the world watched daily for several months. Organizing can be as low-tech as listing what to cover here on a piece of paper and then asking people to go out and cover it with a camera. Or you can go high-tech. Using Cover It Live and Twitter during live events, we're able to let our audience help us with the reporting. The timestamp on both services helps us locate important snippets of videos out of the hours we record, allowing our volunteers to quickly edit clips that are interesting. Using a free service called TubeMogul, we can publish these clips to YouTube, Blip, and more than a dozen other video sites in a matter of minutes. During the RNC, we used crowdsourcing on Twitter to track where news was happening by searching for the RNC hashtag or following particular people's tweets. Since our volunteers were dispersed all over downtown St. Paul, we could have someone on the scene in minutes, and thanks to a free service called Quick, we were able to stream live video of the event as it happened. We still sent people out with regular tape cameras, and they came back with compelling video that we quickly captured, edited, and distributed for the whole world to see. The Uptake, a shoestring volunteer operation, was able to do all this not only because the technology was easy and affordable, but because we were able to organize.